My sister Veronica's voice cut through the elegant restaurant like a knife. Honestly, Emma, I don't know why you even bothered showing up tonight. Look at you, still wearing those discount store clothes, still driving that ancient car, still living in that tiny apartment. You're an embarrassment to this family. The entire private dining room fell silent. 20 family members and Veronica's business associates turned to stare at me sitting quietly at the end of the table. My simple black dress, comfortable and appropriate I'd thought, suddenly felt like a spotlight under their collective judgment. I invited you out of obligation, Veronica continued, standing up for emphasis. But clearly you don't belong here with successful people. Maybe you should leave before you embarrass us further. She gestured toward the door like I was a servant being dismissed. My name is Emma Harrison and I'm 35 years old. What my sister didn't know as she publicly humiliated me in front of our family was that I was the anonymous founder and CEO of Catalyst Ventures, a private equity firm worth $3.2 billion. More specifically, what Veronica had no idea about was that I'd been the anonymous benefactor, secretly funding her interior design career for the past 8 years. Every major client she'd boasted about tonight, I'd arranged them. Every award she'd won, I'd pulled strings to nominate her. Every business opportunity that had made her successful and wealthy, I'd created them from behind the scenes. And in approximately 5 minutes, when her biggest client arrived at this dinner, a client I'd personally sent her way, she was about to discover exactly who I really was. Growing up, Veronica and I had been opposites in every way. She was the beautiful, outgoing daughter our parents adored. I was the quiet, bookish one they barely noticed. Veronica excelled at socializing and making connections. I excelled at mathematics, computer science, and strategic thinking. Our parents had invested everything in Veronica's future. Private schools, networking opportunities, social connections. I'd worked my way through state university on scholarships and part-time jobs. By the time I was 22, I'd developed a revolutionary algorithm for predicting market trends. I'd sold that algorithm to a tech company for $50 million, then invested that money strategically, building wealth that grew exponentially over the next decade. I'd created Catalyst Ventures when I was 27, focusing on identifying promising businesses and providing capital for growth. The firm had been phenomenally successful, making me a billionaire by 30. But I'd kept my success completely private. I operated through layers of holding companies, used trusted representatives for public appearances, and maintained my simple lifestyle deliberately. Why? Because I'd learned early that wealth changed how people treated you. I wanted to know who valued me for myself versus who would only value me for my money. My family had no idea. To them, I was still struggling Emma who worked some vague consulting job, and could barely afford rent. They pitted me, dismissed me, and in Veronica's case openly mocked me. Meanwhile, I'd been secretly supporting Veronica's career since she'd graduated from design school 8 years ago. She'd been talented but directionless, unable to secure major clients despite her training. I'd anonymously hired her through a shell company for a high-profile residential project that I'd actually funded myself. That first project had been featured in design magazines, launching her career. Over the next 8 years, I'd sent her approximately 30 major clients, all wealthy individuals or companies I controlled through various investments. I'd arranged for design awards by funding the organizations that gave them and ensuring Veronica's work was nominated. I'd created opportunities that made her successful, wealthy, and famous in interior design circles. Why had I done it? Because despite how she treated me, Veronica was my sister. I'd wanted her to succeed and be happy. I'd thought that maybe if she found success, she'd become less cruel and dismissive toward me. I'd been wrong. Success had made Veronica worse. More arrogant, more cruel, more convinced of her superiority. Tonight's family dinner was supposedly to celebrate her latest achievement, being hired by Sterling Industries to redesign their corporate headquarters. It was her biggest contract yet, worth $15 million. What Veronica didn't know was that I owned Sterling Industries. I'd acquired it 6 months ago through one of my holding companies, and I'd personally instructed Sterling's CEO, who reported to me, to hire Veronica for this project as a final gift before I stopped supporting her career. Tonight was supposed to be my quiet farewell to this family dinner tradition. I'd planned to sit through the meal, congratulate Veronica, and then gradually distance myself from family events. I was tired of being mocked and dismissed. But Veronica had escalated beyond her usual subtle condescension to outright public humiliation. Standing in front of everyone and demanding I leave because I was embarrassing with my modest appearance was too much. The decision crystallized in my mind. It was time for the truth to come out. Veronica, I said quietly, remaining seated. I think you should reconsider asking me to leave. Why? She laughed. Going to tell us about your important consulting work? We all know that's code for unemployed. Just go, Emma. You don't fit in here. Our mother chimed in from across the table. Veronica, that's a bit harsh. Emma is family, even if she hasn't been as successful as you. The backhanded defense was typical. My parents had always positioned Veronica as the successful daughter and me as the disappointing one. Our father nodded agreement. Emma means well. She just didn't have your drive and talent, Veronica. Not everyone can be exceptional. The casual dismissal of my entire existence stung, though I'd heard variations of it my whole life. Veronica's business associates, people who'd benefited from connections I'd arranged, joined in the mockery. I didn't realize you had a less accomplished sister, one commented. How charitable of you to include her tonight. Another added, Veronica, you're so kind to maintain relationships with family even when they haven't achieved your level of success. I watched this performance with growing anger. These people had no idea that their own success was often connected to my investments and business dealings. The designer sitting to Veronica's right had gotten her start through a grant I'd funded. The real estate developer across from me had received bridge financing from one of my funds. They mocked me while benefiting from my money. Last chance, Emma, Veronica said. Leave voluntarily or I'll have the restaurant escort you out. This is my celebration dinner, and I won't have you ruining it with your poverty and failure. I stood slowly and Veronica smiled triumphantly. But instead of heading toward the exit, I walked to the head of the table and pressed the call button for our private server. Yes, ma'am. The server appeared immediately. Please inform Mr. Sterling that Miss Harrison is ready to see him now, I instructed calmly. The server nodded and departed quickly. Veronica looked confused. What are you talking about? Why would Marcus Sterling want to see you? Because I invited him to this dinner, I replied simply. I thought it would be appropriate for him to meet you in person since you'll be working together on the headquarters redesign. You invited Marcus Sterling? Veronica's laugh was dismissive. Emma, stop fantasizing. You don't know Marcus Sterling. You couldn't get a meeting with his assistant, let alone him personally. Actually, Marcus Sterling works for me, I said. The room went completely silent. Several people exchanged confused glances. My father spoke up. Emma, what are you talking about? You work some low-level consulting job. You don't employ people like Marcus Sterling. I employ Marcus Sterling as CEO of Sterling Industries, which I acquired 6 months ago through my private equity firm, Catalyst Ventures. I let that information settle for a moment. Veronica's face showed complete incomprehension. She genuinely had no framework for understanding what I just said. You're lying, she said flatly. You're making this up to feel important. The private dining room door opened and Marcus Sterling entered. He was immediately recognizable. His face was regularly featured in business publications as the CEO of one of the region's most successful industrial design firms. Marcus crossed directly to me and extended his hand respectfully. Miss Harrison, thank you for inviting me tonight. I've been looking forward to meeting your family. He turned to address Veronica. Miss Harrison, the other Miss Harrison, it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. Your sister has spoken highly of your design work. Veronica stared at Marcus Sterling shaking my hand, calling me Miss Harrison with obvious respect, and referring to me as your sister, like I was the important one. I don't understand, Veronica said weakly. Emma's, she's not, she doesn't. Your sister is the founder and CEO of Catalyst Ventures, Marcus explained patiently. She's my employer and one of the most successful private equity investors in the country. She personally instructed me to hire you for the Sterling Industries headquarters redesign. He pulled out a chair and sat down, clearly comfortable and deferential to me. I've brought the preliminary contracts for Ms. Harrison to review as requested. The entire table was frozen in shocked silence. My parents looked like they'd been slapped. Veronica had gone pale, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Her business associates had shifted from smug superiority to obvious discomfort. I took the contract documents from Marcus and flipped through them casually. The scope looks good. Veronica, you'll be working with Marcus's team to redesign their headquarters. It's a $15 million project, as I'm sure you've discussed. Veronica finally found her voice. You own Sterling Industries? I own the controlling interest through one of my investment vehicles, I confirmed. Marcus runs day-to-day operations, but major decisions like selecting the headquarters designer go through me. But you live in a tiny apartment. You drive an old car. You wear discount clothes. Veronica's worldview was visibly crumbling. I choose to live simply, I explained. I don't need expensive things to prove my worth. Unlike some people, I don't measure success by appearance or status. The pointed comment landed exactly as intended. Veronica had built her entire identity on expensive clothes, luxury cars, and public displays of wealth, all funded by career opportunities I'd secretly arranged. My mother spoke up, her voice shaky. Emma, are you saying you're wealthy? Actually wealthy. I'm a billionaire, mother. Catalyst Ventures is worth approximately $3.2 billion and I own it outright. My personal net worth is slightly higher when you include other investments and assets. The number landed like a bomb. Several people gasped audibly. My father's face had gone from dismissive to calculating. I could practically see him reassessing every interaction we'd ever had. Veronica was shaking her head. This is insane. If you were a billionaire, why would you let us think you were poor? Why would you dress like that and live like that? Because I wanted to know who valued me for myself, I replied. And I learned exactly what I needed to know. You've spent 8 years mocking me, pitying me, and treating me like a failure. Tonight you publicly humiliated me and tried to throw me out of a family dinner. That tells me everything about your character. Veronica's expression shifted from shock to something like panic. Emma, I didn't know. If I'd known you were successful, I would've treated me completely differently, I finished. Exactly my point. Your respect was conditional on my wealth and status. That's not respect, it's social calculation. One of Veronica's business associates attempted damage control. Ms. Harrison, I'm sure your sister didn't mean to be disrespectful. We all just misunderstood the situation. I turned my attention to her. You're Amanda Brooks, correct? You received a $500,000 grant 3 years ago from the Harrison Foundation for Emerging Designers. You used that grant to launch your studio, which is now quite successful. Amanda's face paled. The Harrison Foundation, that's yours? Yes. I fund it anonymously to support talented designers who need capital to start their careers. Your application was strong and you deserved the support. But you just spent the past 30 minutes mocking me for my appearance and supposed poverty. I looked around the table at the other business associates. Mr. Peterson, your real estate development firm received bridge financing from Catalyst Ventures for the Harborview project. Ms. Chong, your architecture firm was recommended for the Sterling Industries campus expansion by my investment team. Mr. Walsh, your furniture manufacturing company has a supply contract with Sterling Industries that I personally approved. Each person I named looked progressively more uncomfortable. They'd all benefited from my business dealings while mocking me to my face. The point, I continued, is that you all made assumptions based on superficial observations. You saw modest clothing and an old car and decided I was a failure. You never considered that some people don't need to broadcast their success to feel validated. Veronica had tears streaming down her face now. Emma, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Please forgive me. For what specifically? I asked. For mocking me tonight? For the past 8 years of condescension and dismissal? For trying to throw me out of this dinner like I was garbage? All of it, Veronica said desperately. All of it. I was wrong. I was cruel. If you'd known I was wealthy, you would have treated me like these business associates treat you, with calculated respect based on what I could do for their careers. That's not what I want from family. My father attempted to salvage the situation. Emma, sweetheart, we've always been proud of you. We just didn't understand the full extent of your success. You've never been proud of me, Father. You told me I lacked Veronica's drive and talent approximately 5 minutes ago. You've spent my entire life comparing me unfavorably to her and suggesting I was a disappointment. Marcus Sterling looked increasingly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding. Ms. Harrison, should I leave you to have this conversation privately? No, please stay, Marcus. In fact, I'd like you to explain to Veronica where her major clients for the past 8 years have come from. Marcus shifted awkwardly. I'm not sure it's fine, I assured him. Veronica deserves to understand how her career was actually built. Marcus took a breath and addressed. Veronica. Ms. Harrison, your sister has been the anonymous benefactor behind most of your major projects. The Riverside estate that launched your career? That was Ms. Harrison's property, purchased through a shell company specifically to give you a high-profile first project. The design awards you've won? The organizations that grant those awards have received significant funding from the Harrison Foundation, and your work has been nominated through channels your sister controls. Veronica was staring at me with absolute horror. The Riverside estate was yours? That was my breakthrough project. The one that got me featured in Architectural Digest and launched my entire career. I bought that property specifically to hire you, I confirmed. You were talented but couldn't get major clients. I wanted to help you succeed, so I created an opportunity. How many of my clients were actually you? Veronica asked, though she seemed afraid of the answer. Marcus consulted a document he'd pulled from his briefcase. According to Ms. Harrison's records, approximately 30 of your 42 major clients over the past 8 years were arranged through her various business entities and investment relationships. She either directly commissioned the work through shell companies or referred you to individuals and firms she had business relationships with. The revelation hung in the air like a physical weight. 70% of Veronica's celebrated career had been secretly arranged by the sister she'd been mocking for years. Why? Veronica whispered. Why would you do that for me after how I've treated you? Because you're my sister, I replied simply. I wanted you to be successful and happy. I thought maybe if you found success you'd become less cruel. I was wrong about that, clearly. Veronica buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Our mother reached for her comfortingly, then seemed to remember that I was the one who'd been wronged and stopped mid-gesture, unsure where her loyalty should lie. Emma, my father started, his tone now careful and respectful, we owe you an enormous apology. We've misjudged you terribly. You've dismissed and belittled me for 35 years, I corrected. Tonight was just the most public example of a lifetime pattern. I turned to Marcus. The Sterling Industries contract. I'd like to modify the terms. Instead of hiring Veronica directly, let's open the project to competitive bidding. She can submit a proposal along with other qualified designers, and the selection can be made on merit rather than my personal referral. Veronica's head snapped up. You're taking away the contract? I'm making it fair, I replied. If you're as talented as you believe, you'll win the bid legitimately. If not, you'll learn whether your success was your own ability or my behind-the-scenes support. Marcus nodded. I'll have my team draft the request for proposals. We'll send it to Ms. Harrison along with other qualified firms. Wait, Veronica pleaded. Please don't do this. I need this contract. This was going to establish me as a top-tier designer. Then you'll establish yourself by winning the bid fairly, I said. Consider it an opportunity to prove your talent is real. The dinner had completely fallen apart. Several of Veronica's business associates made excuses and left, probably worried about how their mocking of me might affect their business relationships with my various companies. My parents sat in stunned silence, clearly trying to recalibrate 35 years of assumptions about their daughters. Veronica continued crying, her perfect celebration dinner destroyed by the revelation that her success was largely manufactured by the sister she'd just publicly humiliated. I gathered my simple coat, purchased at a discount store as Veronica had correctly observed, and prepared to leave. Emma, please don't go, my mother said. We need to talk about this. We need to understand. What you need to understand, I interrupted, is that wealth and success don't change who a person fundamentally is. I'm the same Emma I was before you learned about my money. The only difference is now you're paying attention. My father stood, attempting his businessman voice of authority. Emma, we should discuss this properly. As a family, there are clearly misunderstandings that need to be addressed. The only misunderstanding was yours, I replied. You assumed I was a failure because I didn't advertise my success. You chose not to know me, not to ask about my life or understand what I actually do. That was your choice, and now you're facing the consequences of that choice. Veronica approached me, mascara running down her face. Emma, I'm begging you. Please don't take away my career. Please don't tell people that you were behind my success. It'll destroy my reputation. I'm not going to tell anyone, I assured her. Your reputation is yours to manage. But I'm also not going to keep secretly supporting a career for someone who treats me like garbage. From now on, you succeed or fail on your own merit. But I don't know if I can, Veronica admitted desperately. What if I'm not actually as good as people think? What if I only succeeded because of your help? Then you'll have to work harder and get better, I replied. Like the rest of us did without secret billionaire benefactors smoothing the path. I turned to Marcus. Thank you for coming tonight. I apologize for the family drama you had to witness. No apology necessary, Ms. Harrison, Marcus said respectfully. Should I proceed with the open bidding process for the headquarters redesign? Yes, please. And Marcus? Make sure the selection is genuinely merit-based. No consideration for the fact that one of the bidders is my sister. I want this to be completely fair. Understood, ma'am. I left the private dining room, walked through the restaurant, and got into my ancient Honda Civic, the same car Veronica had mocked earlier. It was 15 years old, had 180,000 miles, and ran perfectly. I'd never seen the point of replacing something that worked just because I could afford better. As I drove home to my tiny apartment, actually a modest but comfortable two-bedroom that I genuinely loved, I felt lighter than I had in years. The secret was out. The family that had dismissed me for decades now knew the truth. And I'd stopped the exhausting charade of secretly supporting Veronica's career while she publicly mocked me. Over the following days, my phone exploded with messages. Veronica called 17 times before I blocked her number. My parents sent increasingly desperate texts asking me to meet with them to discuss family matters. Various relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to catch up and reconnect. I ignored all of it. I needed space to process and decide what kind of relationships, if any, I wanted with family members who'd only noticed me once they learned I was wealthy. A week after the dinner, my lawyer received a formal request from Veronica's attorney. She was asking me to provide a written statement confirming her design talent and the legitimacy of her career achievements. She wants you to publicly confirm that her success was earned rather than given, my lawyer explained. She's worried that rumors about her career being manufactured will damage her reputation. Have there been rumors? I asked. Not that I'm aware of. But she's preemptively trying to protect herself. I considered the request carefully. Veronica had treated me terribly, but I also didn't want to destroy her career out of spite. Draft A. Statement saying that Veronica Harrison is a talented interior designer whose work I've admired and occasionally referred clients to, but that she's built her career through her own skills and efforts. Make it truthful but supportive. You're being generous, my lawyer observed. She doesn't deserve it, I agreed. But I'm not interested in revenge. I just want to be free of the obligation to keep supporting someone who doesn't respect me. 2 weeks after the dinner, my mother showed up at my office. She'd somehow gotten past reception by claiming to be family with an emergency. Emma, please, she said when I reluctantly agreed to see her. We need to talk about what happened. What about it? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Your father and I have been discussing everything and we realize we were wrong. We should have supported you better, asked more questions about your life, shown more interest in your career. You should have, I agreed. But you didn't. And that reveals what your priorities were. We want to make it right, my mother insisted. We want to rebuild our relationship with you. Why? I asked directly. Because you've discovered I'm wealthy and now see value in maintaining a relationship? Or because you've genuinely realized you treated me poorly for 35 years? My mother hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. She wanted to claim it was genuine remorse, but we both knew her renewed interest was at least partially motivated by my wealth. I won't lie and say the money doesn't matter, she finally admitted. It's changed how we see your choices in your life. But it's also made us realize how little we actually knew about you, and that feels like a failure as parents. That was more honest than I'd expected. It was a failure as parents, I confirmed. You invested everything in Veronica, your time, money, attention, pride. I was an afterthought at best. The money I've earned doesn't change that history. Can we start over? My mother asked. Can we build a better relationship going forward? I don't know, I replied honestly. Trust takes time to build and seconds to destroy. You've had 35 years to show interest in my life, and you chose not to. I'm not sure one revelation about my wealth can undo that pattern. My mother left disappointed but with a promise that she'd give me space and time to decide what kind of relationship I wanted with my family. 3 weeks after the dinner, I received a formal submission from Veronica for the Sterling Industries headquarters redesign project. She'd entered the competitive bidding process as I'd suggested. I recused myself from the selection committee and instructed Marcus to handle it with his team, ensuring I had no influence on the decision. The selection process took 2 months. Marcus's team reviewed 15 proposals from qualified designers, conducting interviews and examining portfolios. In the end, they selected a firm from Chicago, not Veronica. Marcus called to inform me personally. Your sister's proposal was good but not the strongest. The Chicago firm had more relevant experience with corporate headquarters and presented a more innovative vision. I hope this doesn't create awkwardness. Not at all, I assured him. I wanted the selection to be merit-based. If Veronica wasn't the best fit, she shouldn't get the contract. When Veronica learned she hadn't won the bid, she called from a new number I hadn't blocked yet. Emma, they chose someone else. I didn't get the Sterling contract. I heard, I replied calmly. Marcus told me the selection committee felt the Chicago firm was a better fit. This is your fault, Veronica said, anger creeping into her voice. You sabotaged me. You made sure I wouldn't win. I recused myself from the selection process entirely, I corrected. Marcus and his team made the decision based solely on the proposals. You simply weren't the best candidate. Because you've been propping up my career for years. Veronica shouted. I've gotten used to winning projects easily, used to clients wanting me because of your secret recommendations. Now I'm competing fairly and I'm losing. Welcome to how everyone else builds their career, I replied. Through actual competition and merit. I can't believe you're doing this to me, Veronica said, her voice breaking. After everything we've been through? I interrupted. You mean the 35 years of you mocking me, dismissing me and treating me like a failure? Or the 8 years I secretly supported your career while you publicly humiliated me at every family gathering? Which part of our history do you think obligates me to keep giving you unfair advantages? Veronica was crying now. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry for how I treated you. I'm sorry I didn't know you were successful. I'm sorry for everything. Can't we just move past this? Moving past requires genuine change, Veronica. Not just apologizing because you've lost access to benefits you didn't know you were receiving. What do you want from me? She demanded. How do I fix this? I don't want anything from you, I replied honestly. I wanted a sister who valued me regardless of my wealth or status. I wanted family who respected me for who I am rather than what I can do for them. You've proven you're not capable of that. That's not fair, Veronica protested. You hid your success from me. How was I supposed to respect accomplishments I didn't know existed? You could have respected me as a person, I suggested. You could have refrained from public mockery and cruelty. You could have treated me with basic human decency regardless of my perceived success level. But you chose not to. The call ended without resolution. Veronica continued trying to contact me periodically, but I maintained distance. 6 months after the dinner, my father requested a formal meeting through my lawyer. He wanted to discuss family business matters and potential estate planning. I agreed to meet at my lawyer's office with full legal representation present. Emma, my father began uncomfortably, I wanted to discuss how your success might impact our family's financial planning. If you're about to ask me for money or access to investment opportunities, the answer is no, I stated clearly. I'm not interested in mixing family relationships with my business. I'm not asking for money, my father protested. I'm trying to understand our family's overall financial picture for estate planning purposes. Your estate planning should involve you, Mother, and Veronica's finances. Mine are separate and will remain that way. My father looked frustrated. Emma, you're part of this family. Your wealth is part of the family's collective resources. No, it isn't, I corrected firmly. My wealth is mine, built through my own work with no support from family. You don't get to claim it as family resources after spending 35 years dismissing my career and abilities. My lawyer interjected. Mr. Harrison, Ms. Harrison has made it clear she's not interested in combining her finances with family estate planning. I'd suggest respecting that boundary. My father tried a different approach. What about Veronica? She's struggling without your support. As her sister, don't you have some obligation to help her? I helped her for 8 years, I replied. I gave her the foundation for a successful career. What she does with that foundation is her responsibility. If she's struggling now, it's because she relied on unfair advantages, rather than developing genuine skills. You're being very harsh, my father observed. I'm being fair, I corrected. For the first time in our relationship, I'm actually being fair rather than generous. The meeting ended without the resolution my father wanted. He left frustrated that he couldn't access or influence my wealth for family planning purposes. 1 year after the infamous dinner, I attended my cousin's wedding, a family event I'd committed to before the revelation about my wealth. The atmosphere was awkward. Family members who'd previously ignored me now sought me out, suddenly interested in my opinions and experiences. Veronica attended with a date I didn't recognize. She'd lost weight, looked tired, and avoided eye contact with me throughout the ceremony. During the reception, she approached me carefully. Emma, can we talk? Just for a few minutes. I agreed, curious about what she wanted to say. We stepped outside onto a quiet terrace. I wanted you to know that I've been in therapy, Veronica began. Working through a lot of issues about self-worth, competition with you, and measuring success. It's been difficult but helpful. I'm glad you're getting help, I said sincerely. I've realized that I was threatened by you my whole life, Veronica continued. Even when I thought you were unsuccessful, some part of me worried you'd eventually surpass me. That's why I was so cruel. Keeping you down made me feel secure. That's an important insight, I acknowledged. But awareness doesn't erase the harm you caused. I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness or for things to go back to how they were. I just wanted you to know I understand now how terrible I was to you, and I'm working on becoming a better person. This conversation felt different from Veronica's previous apologies. There was less desperation and more genuine reflection. How's your career going? I asked. Honestly, I'm struggling, Veronica admitted. Turns out I wasn't as talented as I thought, or rather my talent was inflated by the advantages you were secretly providing. I've had to lower my rates, take smaller projects, and actually compete for work. It's humbling. Humbling can be good for character development, I observed. It's been brutal, Veronica said with a weak laugh. But I think I needed it. I needed to understand what building a career actually takes when you don't have a secret billionaire smoothing the path. We talked for another 20 minutes about her therapy progress, her adjusted career expectations, and her attempts to rebuild genuine skills rather than coasting on manufactured opportunities. For the first time in our lives, we had something resembling an honest conversation. I don't expect us to be close, Veronica said as we prepared to return to the reception. I understand I destroyed that possibility, but I hope someday we can at least be cordial, like distant cousins who genuinely wish each other well. That's a reasonable goal, I agreed. But it'll take time and consistent change from you. I understand, Veronica nodded. I'm just grateful you're willing to consider any relationship at all after how I treated you. 18 months after the dinner, I was profiled in a major business publication. The article was titled, The Invisible Billionaire, Emma Harrison's Private Empire, and detailed my strategy of maintaining privacy while building a $3.2 billion private equity firm. The article didn't mention my family drama, but it did explore my philosophy of living simply despite enormous wealth. Money is a tool, not an identity, I was quoted saying. I don't need expensive clothes or luxury cars to prove my worth. I know what I've built and who I am. That's enough. The publication sparked renewed media interest. I declined most interview requests but accepted a few that allowed me to discuss women in finance, private equity strategies, and the value of privacy in an age of constant social media broadcasting. Several young women reached out thanking me for providing a different model of success, one that didn't require constant public performance or expensive displays. 2 years after the dinner, Veronica's career had stabilized at a more modest level. She worked primarily on residential projects for middle-income clients, had lowered her rates significantly, and seemed more content with smaller achievements than she'd been when chasing prestige and status. She'd also started teaching design classes at a community college, work she apparently found fulfilling. "I'm actually enjoying teaching more than the high-end residential work I used to do," she told me during a rare phone conversation. "The students are passionate and grateful, and I feel like I'm contributing something real rather than just designing expensive spaces for wealthy people." "That sounds meaningful," I said, and I meant it. My relationship with my parents had settled into distant but civil territory. We spoke occasionally, usually around major holidays. They'd stopped trying to claim connection to my wealth or influence my business decisions. The relationship would never be warm or close, but it was honest, which felt like an improvement over the pretense of family unity we'd maintained before. 3 years after the dinner, I expanded Catalyst Ventures' focus to include a philanthropic arm specifically supporting women entrepreneurs from modest backgrounds, people like I'd been when starting out. The Harrison Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs provided grants, mentorship, and business education to women who had talent and drive but lacked capital and connections. I kept my involvement private, working through trustees and representatives. But recipients often learned eventually that I was the founder, and many reached out with gratitude that felt genuine rather than calculated. One woman wrote, "Growing up poor, I was told repeatedly that business success required connections and privilege I didn't have. Your foundation proved that wrong and gave me the opportunity to build something real. Thank you for seeing potential in people others overlook." That letter meant more to me than any business achievement or financial milestone. 5 years after the infamous family dinner, I attended another family gathering, this time a reunion organized by extended family. Veronica attended with her husband of 6 months, a teacher she'd met through her community college work. They seemed genuinely happy together, their relationship apparently built on compatibility rather than status or wealth. Veronica introduced me to her husband with simple honesty. "This is my sister Emma. She's very successful in business, and I'm very grateful to have her in my life despite spending years being awful to her." Her husband smiled warmly. "Veronica's told me about your complicated history. Continue 4:47 p.m. I appreciate that you're here despite that." The gathering was pleasant. Family members had settled into treating me normally rather than with the calculated interest that had followed the initial revelation of my wealth. Some had remained distant, uncomfortable with how the power dynamics had shifted. Others had adjusted and seemed genuinely interested in who I was beyond my money. By the end of the evening, I felt something I hadn't felt at family events in years. Comfortable. Not because everything was perfect, but because the pretense was gone. People knew who I was and I knew who they were. The truth, however uncomfortable initially, had been freeing. 7 years after Veronica had mocked me at that dinner, we met for coffee. Just the two of us, something that would have been unimaginable years earlier. "I never properly thanked you," Veronica said, stirring her coffee absently. "For the years you secretly supported my career even when I was treating you terribly." "You were my sister," I replied. "Despite everything, I wanted you to succeed." "I didn't deserve that kindness," Veronica said. "And I definitely didn't deserve it after how I treated you at the dinner that night." "No, you didn't," I agreed honestly. "But I did it anyway because I hoped you'd change." "Did I?" Veronica asked. "Change, I mean." I considered the question carefully. "Yes. You're more self-aware, less status-obsessed, more genuine. It took losing the advantages you didn't know you had, but you've become someone more real." Veronica nodded slowly. "Losing all those easy opportunities was painful. But it forced me to figure out who I actually am versus who I was pretending to be. I'm grateful for that, even though the process sucked." "Personal growth usually does," I observed. We talked about her teaching, her marriage, her adjusted view of success that prioritized fulfillment over prestige. She seemed more at peace than I'd ever seen her. "Can I ask you something?" Veronica said hesitantly. "Why did you keep your wealth secret for so long? Why not just tell us the truth from the beginning?" "Because I wanted to know who would value me for myself," I explained. "If I'd announced I was wealthy, every relationship would have been colored by that information. People would have treated me differently, wanted things from me, seen me as a resource rather than a person." "But wasn't it lonely?" Veronica asked. Keeping such a huge part of your life hidden from family? Sometimes, I admitted. But it was also clarifying. I learned exactly who cared about me versus who would only care about my money. That information was worth the loneliness. I'm sorry I was in the second category, Veronica said quietly. I'm sorry it took losing your support to realize I should have valued you regardless of your success or wealth. I appreciate that, I replied. And I did. Veronica's growth had been slow and painful, but it seemed genuine. 10 years after the dinner that changed everything, I sold Catalyst Ventures to a consortium of institutional investors for $4.7 billion. I kept the Harrison Foundation and its philanthropic work, but I stepped away from the daily demands of private equity investing. At 45, I had more money than I could ever spend and a desire to focus on different priorities. I started teaching business strategy at a local university, working with students who reminded me of my younger self. Smart, driven, lacking the connections and capital that made success easier for privileged peers. I found the work deeply fulfilling in ways that making billions had never been. Veronica had settled into a comfortable life teaching design and working on occasional residential projects. Her marriage was stable, her contentment genuine. She'd become someone I actually enjoyed spending time with, not a close confidant but a sister I could respect. My parents had mellowed with age, their relationship with me cordial if not warm. They'd stopped trying to claim credit for my success or access to my wealth. We maintained appropriate distance while still participating in family events. The cousin whose wedding I'd attended years earlier had children now, and I enjoyed being the aunt who showed up with thoughtful gifts and genuine interest in their lives. 15 years after being publicly mocked at my sister's dinner, I was invited to speak at a business school about building wealth while maintaining values and privacy. The students were eager and asked thoughtful questions about balancing success with integrity. One student asked the question I'd been waiting for: how do you handle family and friends who only started respecting you after learning about your wealth? I shared the story, not naming names but outlining the situation. A family that dismissed me for years until discovering I was wealthy. A sister who mocked me publicly until learning I'd been secretly supporting her career. The hardest part, I told them, wasn't the initial rejection or mockery. It was accepting that some people will only value you for what you can provide rather than who you are. That realization is painful, but it's also liberating. Once you accept it, you can stop seeking approval from people incapable of giving it freely. Another student asked how I'd maintained relationships with family after such betrayal. By accepting reality, I explained. My sister wasn't capable of respecting me when she thought I was unsuccessful. That told me something important about her values and character. But she's also shown capacity for growth and change over time. I give people space to grow while maintaining boundaries that protect me from further harm. The students appreciated the honesty. Several approached me afterward to share their own experiences with family members who dismissed their ambitions or treated them differently after success. "Thank you for being real about this," one young woman said. "Most successful people talk about having supportive families. It helps to hear that some of us have to build chosen families instead." "Chosen families are often stronger," I replied. "They're based on mutual respect and genuine connection rather than obligation." 20 years after the dinner, Veronica and I sat together at our parents' anniversary celebration. They were celebrating 50 years of marriage, and the extended family had gathered to honor the milestone. "I was thinking about that dinner 20 years ago," Veronica said quietly. "The one where I told you to leave because I was embarrassed by you." "I remember," I replied neutrally. "I replay that night sometimes trying to understand how I could have been so cruel. The only explanation I can come up with is that I was deeply insecure and taking it out on the person I saw as competition." "That's probably accurate," I agreed. "Does it still hurt?" Veronica asked. "Remembering that night and how I treated you?" "Not really," I said honestly. "It hurt at the time, but I've processed it and moved past it. What happened that night ultimately freed me from obligation to support someone who didn't respect me. That was valuable." Veronica nodded slowly. "It freed me too in a weird way. Freed me from coasting on advantages I didn't understand, from pretending to be more talented than I was, from measuring my worth by status and wealth. The loss of your support forced me to figure out who I actually am." "And who are you?" I asked, genuinely curious about her answer. "A decent designer with moderate talent who's better at teaching than doing high-end work." A person who values genuine relationships over status. Someone who's still working on being kind rather than cruel. Not who I pretended to be 20 years ago, but someone I can actually respect. That's significant growth, I observed. Thank you for modeling what integrity looks like, Veronica replied. Even when I didn't appreciate it or understand what you were doing, you maintained your values. That example eventually got through to me. 25 years after being mocked and kicked out of my sister's dinner, I hosted a small gathering at my home, still the same modest apartment I'd lived in when my family thought I was poor. I'd never felt the need to upgrade. The guests included Veronica and her husband, my parents, a few cousins, and several friends from my business school teaching. We gathered to celebrate my 50th birthday, marking half a century of life that had included extraordinary wealth, strategic privacy, family betrayal, and eventual reconciliation. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, I said during the informal toast. This gathering represents something important to me. Genuine relationships built on mutual respect rather than obligation or calculation. I looked at Veronica. My sister and I have a complicated history. She wasn't kind to me for many years, and that night 25 years ago when she publicly mocked me and kicked me out of her celebration dinner was a low point. But it was also a turning point. It ended the pretense and forced truth into our relationship. Veronica raised her glass to me, tears in her eyes. Thank you for being patient enough to let me grow into someone worthy of being your sister. I looked at my parents. Mom, Dad, we haven't always understood each other or valued what the other found important. But we've found a way to coexist with honesty, and that feels like an achievement. My father nodded, acknowledging the complex truth of our relationship. To the room generally, I concluded, I've been fortunate in business and finance, building wealth beyond anything I imagined when I was young. But the real fortune has been learning who values me for myself rather than for what I can provide. That knowledge, gained partly through painful revelations like that dinner 25 years ago, has been worth more than any financial success. Everyone raised their glasses. Veronica was crying openly now, probably remembering the dinner where she'd mocked my discount store dress, and demanded I leave for embarrassing her with my poverty. She had no idea then that I was the anonymous billionaire who'd been secretly funding her career for years, creating opportunities she'd claimed as proof of her superior talent. That night had ended one relationship and begun another. One based on truth rather than pretense. And sometimes painful truth is the greatest gift you can give someone, even if they don't appreciate it until decades later.